and it's nice to have you join me once again. I am Victor Tehemba, and like I said earlier, it's Press Talk, and Press Talk is where we discuss the topical issues that are trending in the nation polity at the moment. And today, just like I do it every other day, as I don't do it alone, I have two other colleagues here with me. I have Mr. Quest Aundu, who is a colleague at TVN. You're welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. And bringing him back again is Mr. Daniel Atai, Honorable Dan Atai. You were here last week, and it's nice to have you back again to join us.
Thank you.
So, gentlemen,
thank you.
So, gentlemen, without wasting much time, because of the limited time that we have, we'll go straight into the very issue that has engulfed the entire landscape of the Nigerian political scene, which is the inauguration of the ministers and their portfolios assigned to them. Now, when you look at it, these ministers, even at the time that they were sworn in, they didn't know their assignment, they didn't know their portfolios until after their swearing in, and then they were assigned this portfolio. Does this tradition seem strange?
Well, for me, it does seem strange, because even on the regular, when you apply for a job, you know exactly what job you're applying for, you know what post you're applying for, and for some people, you go and do some research on that job and know what is required of you on the job when you resume, or when peradventure you are given the appointment. But it's like a surprise. You just come to work and you discover that today you are the head of HR. You have no experience in human resources, but you just find, and so that produces a trend of people who would take a longer while to understand the system they are now in. Yes. Before they begin to adjust, and then before productivity begins to show. So I think it's a trend that will set us back as a nation. And while I'm surprised is there was a retreat before the inauguration where they were giving some orientation, and I wonder what was being discussed at that retreat.
And just saying that, I think before the retreat,
yes,
the ministers, the nominate ministers, they had to take up portfolios at the office of the SGF, and it was intended that it's going to help them familiarize themselves with their various ministries. And yet at that time they still don't know. So those documents they picked up from the ministry, like what document is it that they picked up? Documents of the entire ministries? You go and read
everything. You read about the whole ministries, not knowing which one you'll be heading.
To be honest and to be frank, is appalling, and it makes caricature of our nation anyway. However, it is not different from politics.
Okay.
In politics, you could make appointments as you wish. It's a kind of executive order, executive appointment. And I believe that the international body will also be looking at it from that perspective. But in terms of governance, which is quite different from politics, you put square pegs into square holes. And aside that, you put technocrats as your cabinet in order to yield productivity, just like Mr. Quest said.
So, then, I understand, but you are a business politician, and maybe perhaps you understand. Do you think it was an issue of politics, of lobbying, that played out behind the background, that delayed the assignment of portfolios to ministers? Perhaps ministers...
In politics, nothing is could be being in the hour. Anything could happen in politics. Mm-hmm. And one will not be surprised to believe or to conceive that, area that probably it was because of lobbying that delayed first of all, the nomination, mm-hmm, and eventually the designation of portfolios. Like I was saying earlier, we have come to a stage in the country where, because we've been, I think, since 1960 now, we're 59 years old,
yes,
since our independence, and it seems like we are dragging ourselves backward. We tend to be focused in the early 80s, and but now I don't think we are really pushing towards realizing an independent nation.
Okay.
Uh,
But we look at it that this is why we have a president in the person of Muhammadu Buhari.
yeah, but
that
Buhari
gradually
came.
we might get to
Buhari came with this astute belief. All of us, we actually fought, and we believe that he is, and I still believe that he is competent, and is the general that we used to know that has no tolerance for corruption. Is a no-nonsense president.
and
But
he has
after
gone to
the
that billing.
after the ailment, after the disappointment, the little natural phenomenon that happened to him, to his health, returning from London, Mr. President seems to be so a kind of lackadaisical about his executive functions, in the sense that
But
you give status quo to ministerial nomination,
Okay.
portfolio. If I am nominating you as a minister, I should attach your portfolio immediately, without delaying. Cabinet structure forms ministries, departments, agencies.
Yeah.
And for departments and agencies to function, if they are functioning, it brings productivities in all the parastatals.
So,
And
but
if you keep...
I think we should just
Okay.
leave that thought there for now, and let's look at the list entirely. In the list, in its full list, we find out that 11 ministers who returned,
Yeah.
11
12.
of them retained, not the number of people that returned, those that returned
Were
and
14.
retained
Yeah,
their
yeah,
position.
their
So you will
past
find that
portfolios.
the president retained his hold on the Police and Petroleum Ministry. Adamu still maintained the Ministry of Education.
Education.
And the president promised that his second term is going to focus on education. Retaining Adamu as a Minister of Education, as Minister for Education, does it go in line with what the president has said earlier? Because a lot of critics have come out and said he wasn't effective as a minister in the first time.
And with all due respect to the Honorable Minister, he also came out to say that he had struggled with the ministry, and he has struggled in functioning or in playing his role as a minister in that ministry or as the head of that ministry. Now, one would wonder if focus is being paid or truly seem to be paid in that direction, while somebody who came out to say, quote and unquote, I'm incompetent to handle this portfolio or this office, is still retained in the same position. Now, but it also brings me to what he said about, what Honorable Dan said about square pegs in square holes. You see, the president also promised that his second term was going to be based on merit and technocrats. Now, you have, for instance, you have a doctor heading a ministry completely employment and labor completely out of his jurisdiction, or completely out of his profession, so to say. Now, I would understand that the ministers who came back to maintain their portfolio could be said to have maybe out of experience or out of past
or maybe to
past results to
consider.
Yes, they had already started. That is understood. But for somebody like the Honorable Minister of for Education, who had already not seemed to have done so well to be maintained, a cause for worry, if you ask me.
So, talking about putting square pegs in square holes and round pegs in round holes, Mr. Dan.
Yeah.
So, if you look at the issue of Festus Keyamo, now at the ministerial screening, I can't remember, and I do not remember at any time if any senator, any distinguished senator at that time has asked him any question related to Niger Delta. All questions that were asked were tailored from his CV as a lawyer and a senior advocate of Nigerian. And he gave brilliant ideas of how, if given the Justice Ministry,
The Ministry of
things that
Justice.
he's going to implement
Yeah.
and the changes that he's going to bring about, going to bring about. But now he finds himself as a Minister of State
For Niger Delta.
Niger Delta. What does this portend for?
Like I said before, elements of political appointment also is involved. However, Mr. Festus Keyamo Sam is an all-round comrade. I know him as a nationalist, and from the student days, some of us followed them with late Chief Gani Fayemi. So we know his antecedent in terms of youth mobilization, integration as well. That ministry that has just been given to him, because he is from also that region, will help to quell some unrest.
So his experience.
His experience.
His experience as an activist, his experience as
a
mobilization.
mobilizer,
yes.
Does it come in handy to help him dispatch his duties as a Minister of State for Niger Delta effectively?
Yes.
While I'm having issues with that is the fact that this is a region that is our revenue generating region. And so basically we need somebody who understands the region, which I think that is where Honorable Dan is going.
Yes,
But
it's
when
on
it
that
comes to
ground.
understanding the business of that area,
Yes.
it goes beyond mobilizing the young
No,
people.
it's not just
from
like
that-
I
from
said.
that
I said
area,
he's
that
an
region.
activist. He's a national comrade.
Yes.
Apart from being a senior advocate of Nigeria, he's a comrade. You are first a comrade before you graduated, and then you have your certification to your field of jurisdiction.
Yes.
So, being a comrade, he knows the nitty-gritty of the youth involvement in Niger Delta region, and I can bet you that he will perform well. However, if he had been given the Ministry of Justice, he would have performed even better.
Which is my concern.
Which is also the concern of all of us.
Yes.
Staying on
And
Festus
on
Keyamo.
education that you talked about,
Okay.
Adamu, I think he was also attached a Minister of State also, so that he will not be alone. I mean,
Okay.
there was a Minister
Yes,
of
of
State
State,
for
yeah.
Education, so to attach to him. Remember, the aspect that he failed was the aspect of not, he said he will get Nigerian out of school students absorbed, say up to half, and he never met that promise. So sometimes when you promise before you give him portfolio, he promised that in 2015.
Yes.
That half of the Nigerian out of school students will be dealt with in such a way that we won't have out of school students again in Nigeria up to half. That wasn't attained. And I think that is the reason why probably he was reappointed to that same portfolio to fulfill that promise and assigned another.
Emeka Nwajuba, yes, Emeka Nwajuba.
Yeah, Emeka.
That they come to APC recently and then was given. So staying on Festus Keyamo, another interesting thing about his appointment is that he has at a time prosecuted or tried to prosecute Godswill Akpabio for corruption, and today he's going to serve under the same man. He's going to serve under the same man as a junior minister to the man he tried to prosecute, who is now a senior minister.
I think what comes to mind is a saying. I can't remember who says who's
What goes around comes around.
And then in politics, there are no permanent enemies but permanent interest.
Okay.
So I think in this situation, it is the interest that they are working towards, and their past interest or whatever that was.
And of course, in politics, if you don't learn to let go, hangovers of betrayals, backstabbing,
And bitterness.
witch hunting, blackmails, and what have you, you wouldn't go far in politics.
So
Politics is emphatic. You see it as it is, you say it like that, you drive on as you see it, and you will go far if you quickly forget. Your enemies could come on round tables to discuss interests, and that is why we are telling the youth that our elites don't have religious animosity, tribal animosity, or mediocrity of what do you have? What do you call it? Regionalism.
Yes.
When it comes to feasting on the commonwealth of the people,
They are united.
as it
They are
used
one
to be,
people.
they are
Yeah, they are
united.
one.
Yeah, no, it's so just basically to say that maybe to be able to play good politics in Nigeria, you are not supposed to have some certain principles or ideologies for yourself that you lay down to follow.
And sometimes when you even speak out too early on these principles, you find yourself in this kind of
Oh,
situation.
and saying about that, somebody make a joke that because Festus said he was going to unbundle the Supreme Court, and then the powers that be that said no, this
No.
guy should be like so, and they
Let's
threw
take
him
it
off to
somewhere.
He
Supreme.
could do it. Festus, that I know, could do it. Could even he wants things done the legal way, and of course he boasted that the judiciary that we have now delay cases. Cases are much pending in our court of laws, and it is not becoming of our Nigerian nursing democracy. So what Festus was trying to achieve, if given that department, was to speed track some cases and also get to the prison some corrupt officials, which was never given to him already.
And then when you still look at the list, you find out that some people maintained some parts of their portfolios, but they lost some. So, for example,
Fashola.
Babatunde Fashola, who was the former minister for Power, Works and Housing,
It's now Works and Housing.
Power has been given to Maman.
Yes.
And then we also look at Rotimi Amechi was a minister of transport, and everything that has to do with transportation fell under him, including aviation. So you had Hadi Sirika, Minister of State, that was responsible for aviation. Now he is a minister of aviation. So this less than disintegration of ministries, was this just done to really accommodate and the long list of nominees?
Kind of, but largely the Ministry of Works, Power, Works and Housing is a large one. Combined together is a large one. Of course, a lot of people rose the eyebrow that Fashola never performed, to average in that ministry, especially as regard road construction and so on. Even the housing scheme, remember, the housing scheme is under him. It was under him and still under him. And because of the power issue, that the epileptic power supply that Nigerians used to experience, and the billing system, talking about the holding back of the meter, the metering system, the epileptic power, and the non-availability of power made a lot of people question the integrity and the doggedness of Mr. Fashola, because as a governor in Lagos from 2007 to 2015, he performed credibly okay, that made them sustain him into this facet of the Nigerian sector, believing that he will revamp the Nigerian electricity quagmire that we've been in for over a long period of time. But that department was completely a disappointment on this part of Mr. Fashola.
So I would think also it was just like we said, which is why I think that other part of the department was removed. Yes, I think maybe he was overwhelmed because, like you said, these were three different sectors that Nigerians had always had issues with.
Yes.
And having one person to handle that whole ministry, I think it was overwhelming, if you ask me.
Yeah, even the issue of finance, budget and planning is supposed to be separated too.
Because there are two heavy ministries.
Just too heavy.
So the thing is, it means there are plenty ministries to go around.
Yes.
But the president went ahead to create five more ministries.
And he created 5 more ministries, like the Ministry of Special Duty that he created, and intergovernmental, which is very good.
Maybe I think.
And another one that.
Hold on, Mr. Dan.
Okay.
We'll come back to this discussion once we come back from this break. Please stay with us.
All right.
and this is still press talk. So before we went on that break, Mr. Dan, you were about saying something about the creation of new ministries that the president created to accommodate more people. So we know that we had the new ministries created, that of the humanitarian and disaster
Special
management.
duty.
So we had the special duties and intergovernmental affairs,
Yeah.
and we had several others that were created like that.
Yeah. The ministries created were not a kind of new per se, but for the sake of logistics, they were a kind of put aside. Like, the Ministry of Police Affairs,
Yes.
we used to have it under the past administrations of both Obasanjo, Yaradua, and Goodluck Jonathan. We had the Ministry of Police Affairs, but in the first administration, that ministry was like was silenced
Interior.
under the Interior, directly under the Interior and the IGP. Now, Mr. President decided to bring it up. And then talking about the Ministry of Special Duties, and the Intergovernmental Affairs is a very large ministry, if you ask me. Some governors, some state governors have that commission too, or special advisors, on special duties. Special duties is very, very, very paramount in nation building, especially as a president. Like Mr. President have just said last week, I think the day before yesterday, that he wouldn't want to give access to much ministers to see him. Anybody that wants to have much things to do with him should meet his chief of staff. Now, the Ministry of Special Duty and Intergovernmental Affairs will kind of coordinate and supervise this nitty-gritty, this relationship between other ministers to the president and his, chief of staff. So that ministry is huge. Intergovernment relations, both from the local government and state, and from the state government to the federal. And when you talk about bureaucracy, also is under this very ministry. Bureaucracy, logistics in terms of funding of ecological and
constituency projects.
And constituency projects, non-implementations of projects now will come to bear under this ministry. People will be found wanting if they don't carry out their responsive duty.
I'm interested. It's quite interesting, especially with the Ministry of Special Duties, the way Honorable Dan has explained it, which is where I was going to raise my eyebrow. Now, for the ministries that had already existed, we could say that their roles or their responsibility was clearly cut out. But over time, what I have come to observe in our Nigerian system, or in our system generally, is the fact that roles are not defined at the beginning. Roles are defined as you go. Now, and sometimes as you go, certain roles are assigned to you that may clash or be somebody else's responsibility, and then you start having this conflict between this ministry saying it is our responsibility, it's our duty.
So the special duty now,
which brings us back to the beginning. If these roles, ministries were defined, now part of what the president said through the special advisor on media and publicity was the fact that these current ministers are going to run on specific instructions, specific mandates, specific duties and responsibilities. But we have not been able to see that, which is where I have an issue with communication between the powers or the people in authority and we, the people who they are leading. If we don't know where you're going to, how do we follow you there? That's why I was quite interesting. It was quite interesting to me how Honorable Dan is able to break it down. I think he should be the next president of Nigeria.
So somebody has raised an eyebrow. It was something interesting. So when you look at Mipri Silva, he was being charged and being prosecuted for a large amount of fraud, running into billions of naira. And today, or as of yesterday, he was assigned the what do you call it? The
Ministry of State
the
for
State Ministry
Petroleum.
for Petroleum, and somebody said that is like putting a drunkard in a brewery.
Anyway, per se, you know, the charges, like you mentioned, again, has to do with the interpretation from the judiciary. Like, you, of course, you know, you are not guilty until you are found or proved guilty by a competent court of law, supervised under a judge. So I have not read anywhere where a judge sentenced Mr. Timipre Silva that he's guilty of this corruption and so on. Of course, Mr. President made it clear when he came on board. He said, we won't prosecute you if you return the largesse stolen or probably mismanaged or misappropriated. If you refund them, we'll free you. And it takes a good thief to return fund, of course. If you are a wicked thief, I believe you will not refund whatsoever you have stolen. But a thief that have a second mindset, I say, this thing I have done is bad. Let me, if I do this thing with the law, catch up with me. Okay, let me return it. Even if the law will catch up with me, we'll call those ones repentant criminals. And
you
they
see,
can be forgiven.
Mr. Victor, I also wanted to say something, because sometimes we shoot to the right and claim that the bullet went to the left. Now, when it's time to prosecute somebody else, we are quick to say and quote the law. Now, the law says that if you are accused, before innocence or before guilt is declared, you should be set aside, or you should be excused until proven otherwise. Now, just like you said, there was no court that said he was guilty. Neither was any court that said he was acquitted of any charges. Now, bringing those kind of people to bear, who's not guilty or guilty, it's still in the pendulum. It's still a question of integrity of the person. So I think that as a nation, we should be able to define. I would have felt, or I would have expected that before now, if there was any intentions of appointing him as a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, he should have been cleared of all charges and presented to the Nigerian people as a clean man, because of the fact that this administration has said its pivotal role is to clean Nigeria of corruption. And so you cannot...
The president, who is the captain
spearheading this fight against corruption.
Even at that, he is not the substantive minister of petroleum. Mr. President is. No, he is just a minister of state for petroleum.
He's still a minister, substantive or otherwise.
Yeah,
he's still a minister.
Yes, that is to say, Mr. President would use his spectacle or periscope to view this man in question very well, the activities that is going on in Niger Delta. I think there is wisdom in what Mr. President, in that nomination, in that appointment and portfolio. There is wisdom, because if in my language there is an adage that states that if you give a witch your child to keep, to watch over, the child wouldn't die by the hand of the witch again. So probably that is the wisdom done there.
So when we look at it again, now let me just come from this angle. We have 44 ministers right now, and we're supposed to have 36.
Okay, that is with Mr. President making it 44.
Yes, so we also have 36 per state, then have one per region, which should have been, plus the FCT, would have been 43. So now the president is from Katsina, Hadi Sirika is from Katsina. So it seems in this sense that Katsina has two ministers. At the same time, the Northwest has
8 ministers
per se. Does this not cause some sort of imbalance?
No, it doesn't, because even in Anambra State, they have 2 ministers there. Anambra have 2 ministers there.
Yes, the second minister, who is in Sharon, was appointed on the basis of one per region. Yes.
One would have even said within the North Central Zone that Benue should have been given another ministry attached to the ministry special duties. But judging from the what have you. I don't know why that eluded Benue State. However, Mr. President, in his wisdom, still knows why.
Or perhaps Kwara contributed more to the victory of the president than Benue State.
Politically speaking.
Politically speaking.
which most times comes to play with some of these appointments.
So look,
yes.
on a final note, there is somebody else I would want us to look at. That is Sharon Ikeazu. Sharon, while she was at the pension board, Petard, I believe, where she was, she did marvelously well. She was like a shining star. In fact, she was the one ministerial nominee that people singled out for praises and accolade because she did very well. And now she's being pushed to the Ministry of Environment, which would this affect her performance?
I think it will, because the pension board to this moment is still a challenge to the Nigerian pensioners, because as a son of someone who served this country in the military and whose father was earning from the pension, I can tell you that the corruption in that sector is like the corruption in the Nigerian police that people are complaining about. It's also like the corruption we see that is still fighting back, that governance is very, very difficult to attain in this country. Well, if Mr. President have given the onus of the pension board to another person, we pray the person should be competent enough to handle, the challenges there.
Looking at Sharon, where would you have thought that she would have been assigned to?
Okay.
Considering her
before we even talk about where she would have been assigned, I think that it still brings us back to where we started from. Square pegs in square holes. But also looking at it from another angle, they say government is a continuum. Government is continuity. If you start a process, somebody else comes, the person should be able to build on the gains of that process that you had already begun. So one would expect that whatever successes, whatever achievements you had attained in the ministry, in the pension board or the pension body, the person, whoever, experienced in that area or not, should be able to come and read through the history, read through the papers, and know what was being done, what should be done, and what can be introduced, and then move from point A to the next. So that would also mean that if our system runs the way it's supposed to be, then that sector will not suffer as much. Now, talking about the ministry she would have functioned well, I don't know if there was a pension ministry, I would have said...
There's a productivity and labor.
Yes,
and productivity.
Productivity. Maybe I would have
trade and investment.
All right. So I think that, well, for the portfolio she would have been given, who knows? Maybe she has other experiences in the area of environment that we are not privy to. So hopefully the experience, and some people are productive people regardless of where you put them. So if she was being productive in the in the pensions board, one would expect that she will be productive wherever she
was actually sanitizing that.
And there's another nominee or a minister that also caught the eye. Rauf Aregbesola, assigned Ministry of Interior.
Who came out this morning to say he knows nothing about that ministry?
Allegedly, anyway. Because I didn't watch him say so, but people said he said so this morning.
Okay, so
probably he was expecting another rosy ministry, but no, Ministry of Interior is a good one.
People had predicted he would be giving works and housing because he did well when he was commissioner for works in Lagos State, and he also did well as a governor in terms of works in Osun State. So, but let's just round up today's episode on that note. Perhaps we will come back here another time to discuss, to continue this conversation, because it's so wide and long that we can't cover it under the
moreover, we have a minimum of 44 people to discuss.
Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for spending your time here with us. It's very sad that we've come to the end of today's Press Talk. But we'll be here tomorrow to continue this conversation. I remain Victor Tehemba. Thank you, Mr. Quest Ahundu, for being around, and thank you, Mr. Daniel Atali, for
Thank
also
you very
coming
much for
around.
having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.